They thought their sins would wash away, but she saw everything.
Out here in Dry Creek, the wind carried more secrets than the sheriff's ledger, and most folks never bothered to look past the dust. But there was one girl who saw everything, even when no one saw her at all. They called her the Laundry Girl. Ella lived in a crooked shack behind the saloon, tin roof rusted like an old rifle barrel. 17, maybe 18. Too young to have hands so worn and knuckles raw from lye soap and cold creek water. She scrubbed shirts stiff with dust, trousers torn by barbed wire, and stains that weren't always mud, or not from natural causes. Men tossed their burlap bags on her porch at dawn without a word. Leave it by the door. She'll handle it. That's all she was worth to them. Boots clinked, doors creaked, guns rested heavy on belts. But Ella moved like a ghost in daylight. Her fingers bled, her back ached, yet she worked in silence, never asking why some shirts had burn marks or why some bullet holes had no exit tears. In Dry Creek, curiosity could get you buried with no name. But Ella had one flaw, the kind that ruins people. She paid attention. Every thread told a story someone wanted forgotten. Every stain whispered a truth buried under whiskey and lies. And while the town ignored her, Ella stitched their sins together one cloth at a time, because she wasn't just scrubbing clothes, she was scrubbing evidence. Everyone thought she was invisible until the day she found the locket, and realized she'd been washing the blood of a woman no one would ever speak of again. Morning crept over Dry Creek slow, like the sun wasn't sure it wanted to witness another day here. Boots hit the boardwalk. Spurs clinked like ticking clocks counting down to someone's next mistake. Ella stepped outside, braid hanging over her shoulder, apron already tied. 4 sacks waited on her porch, shirts caked in dust, trousers stiff like they'd been dragged through barbed wire, and one stain high on the chest that looked too rusty to be mud. She didn't flinch. She'd seen worse. Inside her shack, she dumped the first sack on the table. The shirt smelled like sweat and horse. Normal, but the smear across the front was thick, dark, dried into the cotton like it belonged there. Bullet wound, she thought, then swallowed the thought like poison. She scrubbed until the water swirled pink, then red, then pale again. These clothes carried confessions no cowboy dared speak aloud. She was just the hands that washed them away. But when she reached into the second sack, something slid from a pocket and struck the wood with a soft metallic clink. A locket, small, gold, dull like it had been carried too close to the heart. Too long. Ella wiped it clean with her apron and traced the engraving, a wildflower, or maybe a flame. Her hands trembled as she snapped it open. Inside lay the face of a woman. Dark hair, serious eyes, a mouth shaped like smiles were rare and costly things. Ella froze. This wasn't some random trinket. This meant someone mattered to someone else, and somehow that felt dangerous. The shirt belonged to Colt Harrow. She recognized the stitching. Rough cowboy, faster with a gun than apologies. Not the type to carry a woman's face over his heart. She knew she shouldn't, but she stared anyway, like the woman was trying to speak. Finally, Ella pressed the locket shut and slid it back into Colt's pocket. "It's not my business," she whispered, but she already knew it was. Subscribe if you want more dark Western mysteries. She thought it was a one-time secret, until another locket surfaced. Same face, different man. 2 days later, the morning came with a bitter wind, and another line of burlap sacks waiting on Ella's porch. She carried them inside, each one heavier than the last, as if the town itself was dumping its sins into her hands. She washed without thinking. Soap, scrub, rinse, moving like a machine built from routine and quiet exhaustion. Then she reached for a dark blue shirt, finer than most, its fabric soft and cleanly stitched. It belonged to Jesse Lane. Jesse wasn't like Colt Harrow. He tipped his hat to ladies, spoke with a calm drawl, and never stirred trouble unless trouble found him first. A gentleman cowboy, if such a thing existed. Ella turned the shirt inside out, ready to scrub the collar, when something dropped into the tub with a faint splash. She froze. Her fingers searched beneath the suds and closed around something cold and familiar. When she pulled her hand free, her heart stuttered. A second locket. Same engraving. Same weight. Same woman. Her breath hitched as she opened it, water dripping down her wrist. There she was, dark hair, serious eyes, lips pressed into that same haunted almost frown. But this one looked worn, like someone had held it often, thumb brushing the glass until it fogged with prints. Colt had one. Jesse had another. Men didn't carry a woman's face against their chest unless she meant something. Ella swallowed hard. Was she a lover? A sister? A ghost lingering in silk and memory? She traced the woman's cheek through the glass before snapping the locket shut and sliding it back into Jesse's pocket. But this time she couldn't bury the question that clawed at her ribs. Who was she? Ella tried to forget until the third locket surfaced, alongside far more blood than any shirt should carry back to town. A week passed, and the wind moved through Dry Creek like it carried rumors in its teeth. Ella kept her head down, convincing herself the matching lockets were just coincidence. Two lonely cowboys loving the same woman. Strange, yes, but not impossible. Then Rhett Calder's sack showed up at her door. Rhett was different. Quiet, polite, a man who stood with his back to the wall and eyes on the door, like he expected death to walk in any minute. Ella lifted his shirt from the sack and felt the breath leave her lungs. The shoulder seam was torn, ripped as if someone had grabbed him hard. The fabric was stiff with dried blood, far more than a bar fight or a lucky bullet graze. Her hands moved on instinct, scrubbing, rinsing, watching the water turn redder than anything she'd seen from a man who still walked upright. Something struck her wrist beneath the water, solid and metallic. She already knew before her hand broke the surface. A third locket, same engraving, same chain, same woman. But this one was cracked, splintered right across the heart. Ella's knees nearly gave out as she opened it. The same face, same eyes, same mouth that didn't know how to smile. 3 cowboys. 1 woman. One of them loved her. One of them lied to her. And one of them might have killed her. Ella sat in her small chair, hands dripping, pulse hammering in her ears. The desert wind rattled the windows like a warning. Stay silent or disappear. But silence had already taken someone else. And soon, Ella would learn the woman's name. Not from the town, but from the clothes stitched with the truth. After that day, Ella wasn't just washing clothes. She was watching, quietly stitching the town's stories together in her mind. Outwardly, nothing changed. She still hauled sacks at dawn, still scrubbed shirts until her knuckles split, still hung secrets on a line where the wind could dry them clean. But now her eyes followed every boot step, every flinch, every name spoken too softly. Colt Harrow laughed loudest at the saloon, but beneath his grin was something sharp, desperate, like fear wearing a mask of swagger. Jesse Lane still tipped his hat, still smiled gentle, but sometimes she caught him staring at nothing, jaw clenched as if choking down a memory. Rhett Calder stayed in the shadows, back to the wall, eyes mapping exits like a man who expected bullets instead of conversation. Days passed, and Ella tried to pretend she wasn't hunting answers, until one afternoon she heard voices behind the general store. She froze, hard in her throat, and leaned against the old barrels. Colt's voice cut through the wind, low and furious. "I told you to forget her." Jessie's reply trembled with anger, not fear. "She wasn't yours to own, Colt. You don't get to decide who she talked to." Ella's pulse pounded. The silence that followed felt like gunpowder waiting on a spark. Colt spoke again, voice scraping the air. "She decided. She left." Jessie snapped back, hollow and breaking. "She didn't leave. She disappeared." Boots shifted in the dirt, and the men walked away, leaving the truth hanging like smoke. Ella stood there shaking, knuckles pressed to her lips. The woman in the lockets hadn't left town. She had vanished. And soon Ella would find the first proof, not in the streets, but sewn into the very clothes she washed. The next clue didn't come from whispered arguments or barroom tension. It came from a hem, small enough to miss unless you lived your life with a needle in your hand. Ella lifted Rhett's shirt to mend a tear near the bottom, thread and needle ready, when something rough scraped her fingertip from the inside of the fabric. She squinted, holding the cloth up to the fading light. There, stitched so small it was nearly invisible, was a set of initials. For M. Ella's breath caught. She checked again, fingers trembling, then tore through the folded laundry she'd already finished. Colt's shirt, tiny hand-stitched marks near the collar. Jessie's shirt, same thread, same style, same hidden message. Margaret was sewn into their clothes like a ghost trying to leave proof behind. That night, Ella walked to the small church on the hill, not to pray, but to look. The bulletin board was a graveyard of old notices and wanted posters, but one paper clung to the wood like it refused to be forgotten. Missing. Margaret Hayes. Dark hair. Brown eyes. Last seen 2 months ago. Wears a gold locket. Ella's pulse roared in her ears. 2 months ago. That was when the bloodstains started getting worse. She stared at the drawing until the sky burned orange behind the steeple. Margaret wasn't just loved. She wasn't just lost. Something had happened, here in Dry Creek, and the truth had bled onto shirts that landed in Ella's tub. She whispered into the cold wind, "I see you." The wind answered, rattling the church door like bones. If you're still here, subscribe. There are more buried secrets coming. And now that Ella had a name, she needed answers, and she would start with the quietest cowboy of them all. Now that Ella had a name, she needed a voice, someone who could confirm what the town refused to say out loud. Rhett Calder was the only man who looked at her like she wasn't just a pair of hands, so she waited for him. Late afternoon painted Dry Creek in rust-colored light when Rhett approached her porch with another sack. "Evening, Miss Ella," he said softly, same as always. But this time Ella didn't step aside. She stood in the doorway, blocking him like a gate. "Who is Margaret Hayes?" The name hit the air like a gunshot. Rhett didn't flinch, didn't even look surprised. Instead, his shoulders sagged like he'd been carrying that question alone for far too long. "Where'd you hear that name?" he asked. Ella lied without meaning to. "Church board." The truth was sitting inside her tub, still dripping with blood she'd washed clean. Rhett's gaze drifted past her to the clotheslines, the folded shirts, the basin where the town's sins soaked in silence. "You see more than you let on," he murmured. She didn't deny it. His voice dropped lower. "Margaret Hayes. She was the best thing this town ever had, and it tore her apart just the same." Ella's chest tightened. "Did you love her?" Rhett let out a single broken laugh. "Everyone loved her. That was the problem." Before she could ask more, boots creaked behind her. Colt Harrow stood in the doorway, shadow long in the fading light. "Sheriff wants a word with you," he said, eyes locked on Rhett with a warning buried behind the words. Rhett picked up his sack, jaw tight. As he passed Ella, he spoke just loud enough for only her to hear. "Careful, laundry girl. Dig too deep, and this town might wash you out too." Ella should have stopped there, but the truth was already soaking into her hands, and the next time she searched their clothes, she would uncover the secret that proved Margaret knew she'd never left town alive. Ella waited until the saloon lights dimmed and the streets emptied, until Dry Creek sank into the kind of silence where the truth could finally breathe. She lit a single oil lamp, its glow trembling like her hands, and pulled the shirts from each cowboy, Colt's, Jesse's, Rhett's, laying them out on the table like bodies waiting for autopsy. This time, she wasn't washing away their sins. She was looking for them. From Colt's shirt, she slipped out the first locket, metal warm from being carried close to the skin. From Jesse's, she retrieved the second, still smudged with a thumbprint worn by longing. From Rhett's, she pulled the third, cracked across the heart like the woman trapped inside had tried to break free. Ella lined them up in a row, 3 silent witnesses staring back at her. She opened them one by one. Behind Colt's glass, Margaret's face looked cold, defiant, and on the back, scratched in jagged letters, "She was mine first." Jesse's locket held the same face, but softer, eyes gentler. On the back, "I'll wait for you." Rhett's locket had no inscription, only a folded strip of paper so thin and hidden she almost missed it. Her heart thudded against her ribs as she unfolded it. The ink bled and shaky, but clear. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. Colt is jealous. Jesse is scared. They both want me to choose. I'm tired. You're the only one who ever listened without taking anything back. If I disappear, don't let them say I ran. M." Ella's breath broke into a gasp. Margaret hadn't run away. She knew she was in danger. Someone wanted her silenced. And whatever happened, it happened here. A floorboard creaked outside. Ella snuffed the lamp, shoved the lockets back into the shirts, and stuffed the note into her apron just as the door eased open. Colt Harrow stepped into the moonlight, gaze sharp and hungry. Colt wasn't just looking for trouble, he was looking for loose ends. And now, Ella was one of them. Colt stepped inside without knocking, the moonlight slashing across his boots as if even the night didn't want to touch him. Ella stayed perfectly still, hands pressed against the table to stop their shaking. He looked around slow, eyes scanning the room like a man searching for footprints in fresh snow. Shirts half folded, water still rippling in the tub, shadows too restless to be innocent. "You work late," he said, voice low and lazy, but his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Ella forced a small smile. "Laundry doesn't wait." Colt's gaze flicked to her apron pocket, the outline of the folded note barely noticeable unless someone already knew what they were looking for. "Ever find things in our clothes?" he asked, tone casual but sharp beneath the surface. "Notes? Trinkets? Stuff we forgot?" Ella swallowed. "Just dirt and blood." He stepped closer, close enough she could smell iron and whiskey on his breath. "See? That's what I like about you," he murmured. "You don't ask questions. You just wash things away." His hand lifted, slow, testing, as if he might reach into her pocket, into her secrets. But he stopped, letting his fingers hover near her cheek instead, a mockery of gentleness. "But if you ever started talking—" His smile twisted, eyes going dead behind it. "People might start thinking you're part of the story, and stories have endings." Ella didn't back away. She looked up, voice barely more than breath. "I don't tell stories. I clean up after them." The words hung between them, thin as thread but stronger than steel. Colt stared at her a long moment, then tipped his hat and slipped out the door into the dark. The second the latch clicked shut, Ella's legs gave out. She slid to the floor, shaking hard enough to hear her teeth tap. Her apron pocket felt like it held a burning coal. By morning, the town would explode with accusations, and Ella would have to choose between staying invisible or dragging the truth into daylight with her bare hands. Morning broke sharp and loud in Dry Creek, not with gunfire, but with whispers that sounded just as deadly. Word spread fast. Rhett Calder had been arrested, locked in a cell beneath the sheriff's office. Suspicion of murder, someone hissed by the well. Margaret Hayes, the blacksmith muttered under his breath. Colt Harrow leaned against a post outside the sheriff's door, arms crossed like he owned the sunrise. Jesse paced the boardwalk, eyes hollow, hands shaking like he was holding a ghost he couldn't let go. Ella watched from her doorway, apron tied, heart pounding. She could stay invisible. Pretend she never saw the matching lockets. Pretend she never felt the fabric stiff with blood. Pretend Margaret Hayes hadn't hidden her truth in their clothes because Ella was the only one who would ever see it. But pretending was how Margaret disappeared. Ella walked toward the sheriff's office, each step heavier than the last. Inside, the room fell silent. "You got business here?" Sheriff Dugan asked, confused. Ella nodded, voice barely steady. "I washed the cowboys' clothes." A few men snickered, but she reached into her apron and laid the folded note on his desk. "I found this," she said, in Rhett's shirt. The sheriff read it slowly, color draining from his face. When he finished, the room felt like a storm holding its breath. Colt pushed off the wall, spitting out, "On the word of a laundry girl?" Ella turned to him, fire quiet but unshakable. "I see what you try to hide," she whispered. "Every stain, every rip, every lie that bleeds through cotton. You can threaten me, Colt Harrow, but you can't wash Margaret off your hands." Weeks passed. No body was found. Jesse left town before dawn, riding east. Rhett was freed but carried shadows in his eyes. Colt rode out alone and no one asked where. Ella kept washing clothes at the edge of town, but now they looked her in the eye when they dropped their sacks, like they finally understood the cost of silence. Some scars don't live on skin. They live in what people leave behind, and who's brave enough to clean it. Every time Ella scrubbed out a stain that refused to vanish, she whispered, "I see you." And the wind answered, warm and wild. Because out here they thought gunslingers wrote history, but sometimes it was the laundry girl. If you want more dark Western stories like this, subscribe so you never miss the next secret in the dust. The town slept again, but secrets don't stay buried, and Ella's tub was never empty for long.